Is Darlene going Zoom or no?
And here,
Is Darlene going on Zoom or no?
she's going Zoom when she can, but she might be late coming on.
Okay, well, let's wait and see when she comes on. No, it's just coming in. Okay. Oh, it's not. Don't have one. Right. Okay. You don't. Okay. You don't have to. Oh. Okay. Okay.
Like to welcome everybody here. To start off, let's go to pledge, stand in the pledge allegiance to the flag. Follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Declaration of conflict of interest. Anybody recuse, any recusals on the agenda items?
None.
No.
No. Approval of the minutes. Anybody had a chance to read the minutes? Everybody's
I did.
got any corrections?
At least the part that I read,
Okay.
or the part that I spoke about was there, so I knew we approved the minutes from the August 14, 2024 meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have Alan Easton on?
Just a minute. I can see you. I guess I'm
Can hear you.
okay.
Hang on 1 second, Alan.
I have just been promoted to a panelist, so I guess I'm there.
Yep, and do we have his PowerPoint presentation?
I can, if I can share my screen, I can do it that way.
Oh, yeah, I can see it, and I'm gonna go out and sit with Sherry. So,
Alan, if you just wanna let us know what page, we'll just go ahead and follow through, so just say page 1 or page 2 or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, this is page 1, just introduction to dark skies is what I'm doing. Go to the next one. If you would. Let's see, maybe I can do that from here. Okay, that doesn't work. Go to the next page if you would, Crystal. Can you? I don't see that working, Crystal. Is that
Hold on,
okay?
we're just trying to make you louder.
Excellent. I suppose I could speak a little louder, but I've got a low voice and it doesn't carry well. Incidentally, I'm impressed by your meeting already. The way you get through minutes in a quick and orderly fashion is wonderful. I've sat in enough meetings where we had to listen to extended minutes. That this is terrific. Okay, that looks like we now have page slide 2 up.
Yes.
Okay. So the idea is why do we worry about dark skies at all? Some of it is historical. I mean, 99% of the people in Europe and the United States are affected by light pollution. And something like 83% of all the people in the world can't see the Milky Way at night. That's not the biggest part of the problem, but it is a big part of it. Go to the next slide, if you would, Crystal. So light pollution, we need to define just a little bit. Basically, it's the inappropriate or excessive use of light. And that it is manifest in a couple different ways. Glare is the most obvious. if things are too bright, it makes it difficult for us to see. Just driving around at night, if somebody's headlights are in your eyes, it makes it difficult for you to see. And that happens in other things besides driving as well. There's the brightening of skies over inhabited areas. There's the light trespass, which is in its easiest form is light going where you don't want it, like a street light running in right in your bedroom window and that sort of thing. And then there's clutter, when there are just too many light sources and you can't figure out what's going on. This often happens in areas of concentration of businesses where everybody's light is trying to outbrighten everybody else's, and it just turns out to be a mess. One thing that it happens is this is a misuse of wasted energy. It takes energy to burn all those lights, and if we're having light going into the sky instead of on what we want to have lit up, we're wasting really kind of a precious resource. Could we go to the next slide at this point? Here's a good example of what happens. This is a little town in New England before and during a power blackout. And you can see what they were missing the whole time they had too many lights on to see the sky. That's kind of what we're talking about, but there are other reasons why light pollution is a problem. If you go to the next slide, please. It should say, so why is this a problem? Well, it's increased energy consumption, which is not good for our pocketbooks. It disrupts ecosystems and wildlife. Even worse, it's a harm to human health. And I'll explain that in a minute. And there are some deleterious effects on health, on crime and safety. A lot of people think the brighter it is, the less the crime. That's not quite true. It's a little more nuanced than that. If we go to the next slide, here's a little bit about what light pollution is costing us. More than 10% of the residential electricity use in the United States is for outside lighting. Of that, about half of it is wasted because we're lighting up the sky instead of the streets and our homes and places that we want to have lit up. That's about $10 a piece just for every man, woman, and child in the country to light up the sky that's unnecessarily so. And you'd need to plant something, if you're interested in that, you'd have to plant about 600 million trees to offset the amount of extra CO2 that produces. We could go to the next one. It's a little less busy a slide. How does light pollution affect wildlife? Well, it's been shown that if it's too bright at night, mammals' reproduction goes down. Many animals find it easier to forage and get food at night, but the problem is it makes them easier prey for their predators. So instead of going out, and they try not to get eaten by something else and don't forage as efficiently. As you've probably seen pictures of turtles on the seashore. If you have lights, the turtles' instincts are to follow the sunlight on the water to get back into the ocean. But if the beach has a commercial area that's lit up, the turtles will head for McDonald's instead of over to the ocean where they ought to be going. We all know we've heard about birds running into buildings that are lit up at night. There's something like 100 million birds every year get hit. We had a program in Salt Lake City that went out and counted them, and there were like 5,000 birds one night that were killed by flying into buildings in downtown Salt Lake. I don't think you've got that problem in Virgin, but it is a problem in a lot of places. Of course, we all know about moths and light, but when the moths get around the light, the bats can find them pretty easily. Nice dinner for the bats, but it's not too great for the insects. It also affects insects that we depend on for good things like honeybees. So artificial light at night is not good for a lot of animals. If we could go to the next slide, it's also not good for people. Besides disrupting the natural sleep cycle, if it's too light at night, it's been shown that too much light at night can increase the risk for obesity, depression, diabetes, heart disease. There's even a recent report out within the last 2 weeks that too much light at night increases your risk of suffering from Alzheimer's disease. I'm not 25 anymore, and I'm starting to worry a little bit about Alzheimer's. I just as soon not get it. Blue light is the worst. We've heard the things about blue screens and how spending too much time on your cell phone at night can keep you from sleeping well. The problem is the light in the blue end of the spectrum, which turns out to have the most energy and is the most efficient at disrupting parts of your body that are affected by that light. We can go to the next slide. A lot of people are worried that if you don't have enough light, you're going to have real safety problems. This slide is kind of interesting because it shows the problem with too much light, which is glare. If you get glare in your eyes, the natural physiological response is for your pupils to constrict. So it lets less light in, which means that you can't see anything that's in the shadows. But if you were able to block out some of that excess glare, like the picture on the right, you can all of a sudden see things that you could not see before, that were there all the time, but the glare kept you from seeing them. Now, I was back in the Jurassic period. I spent 2.5 years in France as an LDS missionary. And I noticed when I got there that all the cars had yellow headlights. And I thought, that is really strange. And I couldn't imagine why they had yellow headlights because it didn't look like you could see as well. Well, after I'd been there a little while, I was allowed to drive and I discovered something. You can see just as far down the road with the yellow headlights as with the white ones. But in addition, you can see what's off on the sides of the road much better. So I could see traffic coming from the sides of the road, and I could see pedestrians where with the bright white lights, I just couldn't see them. It was kind of unexpected, but it's something that's quite real, and it's a real effect of having better lighting is that it does increase safety. It's almost counterintuitive, but nevertheless, that's how it works. This next slide shows a little more. I talked about the constriction of pupils. There are some advantages to dark sky compatible lighting in that you get better vision in the shadowed places. There are fewer places for criminals to hide. And you have less glare and less light trespass, so your residents actually see more. It's a good thing. I've been trying to turn down the lights in the complex where we live for exactly that reason, and people are starting to understand it. Where are the problems? Next slide. Here's a world map showing what's lit up. Basically, North America is pretty brightly lit. Notice that everything east of the Mississippi is pretty bright. This next slide, if you will, shows what's happening in the United States. You can see the Mississippi River is a big divider. You can see, looking at Utah, the big blob in the middle is the Salt Lake metropolitan area. It goes, Ogden to Provo. But you can see that little string of lights going down towards the big blob there is Las Vegas. And the next ones up are, the second one is St. George and then Cedar City. And I think, trying to remember, Mesquite is the one between Las Vegas and St. George. You guys are off in one of those lovely dark places, so you can see the night fairly well from Virgin. I hope you really want to keep it that way, and that's what I'm going to try and convince you is a good thing. Let's go to the next slide. This is Utah. All of those little things that look like stop sign or yield signs are actually night observatories where you can see what things are. I've noted the ones where Bryce Canyon and Zion Lodge are. And you can see you're off in a reasonably dark area, not as dark as some out in Nevada, but not so bad compared with the metropolitan areas. Let's go to the next slide, if we will. There are 5 things that Dark Sky International would like us to consider when it comes to lighting. Incidentally, I saw that I was listed as chairman of the Dark Sky Commission. I've never been promoted that high. What I am actually is the chairman of Dark Sky Utah, which is the Utah chapter of Dark Sky International. I'm a volunteer. In real life, I'm a chemist, and I play piano in a swing band. Oh, I've flunked retirement twice, and I can't seem to get out of doing some of these things. Anyway, what light really wants, what we really want to do with light is use it only where it's needed. You know, all light should have some good reason for being. You don't just light up something to have it lit. You got to be some reason for it. You want the light to fall where it's needed, not just everywhere. You don't want it any brighter than it has to be. What's the point? You don't need it brighter than it has to be because you gain nothing for it, but it costs you money to do it. And you use light only when it's needed. It's nice to have motion detectors, for example, in security lights around your house. We all think, yeah, burglars won't come where there's bright light. They're even more frightened if they go somewhere where it think it's dark and all of a sudden the light comes on. It's far more efficient to use light only when you need it instead of all the time. And finally, because blue light is the big villain in a lot of the physiological problems with light, both for animals and people, use the blue light a little less, make the lights be a little warmer in color. So you tend a little more towards the yellow than to the blue range. So those are the 5 principles that Dark Sky talks about a lot. Let's go to the next slide. Here's how they work. You start on the far left with a very bright street light with light going everywhere. You use shielding to make sure that the light falls where you want it, which is on the street or the road or the sidewalk or wherever. You use something other than the bright blue light. You see as much, but it's easier on your eyes. The color temperature, that's going from the blue to the warmer tones. You tone it down to where you need only as much light as you need. And then finally, you only turn it on when you need it. There's nothing exotic in any of these principles. It's pretty much common sense. But sometimes we need to be reminded, that common sense isn't necessarily as common as we'd like. Okay, the next slide, if we could. A lot of people wonder, okay, what kind of light fixtures work? So here's a picture of some that put light where we don't want it and some that put light where we do. These are available from a number of different vendors all over. If you need help, one of the things that we have at Dark Sky Utah is a collection of where to get some of these things. So anyway, next slide if we can. And that shows a little bit of color temperature. The color temperature is an odd measurement because it's expressed in kelvins. Now, Kelvin is actually a measure of temperature. And where they get these numbers is if you had an iron bar and you heated it up, it'd start by going orange, and the hotter it got, the more blue it would get, until finally it was just absolute bright white. And so the color temperature is the temperature at which an iron bar would look that color. Anyway, some of the daylight lights, you can go down to Lowe's or Home Depot and run 5,000 K, and they're awfully bright and awfully white. I have 2,700 and 3,000 K in the street lights around where I live, and that works much better. You can see wonderfully, but it's not as hard on the eyes or as hard on anything else. Okay, next slide. You might wonder, how dark is dark? Well, there's actually a scale. We have instruments that can measure it. You're probably out in this number 3 area, where rural sky, you can see lots of stars. You can see the Milky Way. You can start seeing the Milky Way drift across just behind the number 3 there. You can get even darker than that. Here in Salt Lake, I'm at number 7. It's not nearly as interesting. I would love to, I think you may have heard I drove down to Virgin a couple of weeks ago the night power went out, and got to see what a really nice place you guys live in and how beautiful the sky is down there. It was hard driving home after that. Anyway, next slide. One of the things that Dark Sky International does is it certifies dark sky places, just to help people know where to find them. Utah has more dark sky places than any other jurisdiction in the entire world. Utah has good dark skies, and we have people who are very proud of it and want to be certified as dark sky places. But some of them are happy to use that as a way to attract tourists who want to look at those good dark skies. That may or may not be what you have in mind. You may or may not be interested in certification, but that's one of the things that Dark Skies International does, and we can offer helping you with that if you want, or if you don't. You know, this is basically your thing. Dark Sky Utah exists to help people make their skies as dark as they would like for whatever their reasons are. So we're not trying to push one thing or another. This is your decision, not mine. So anyway, next slide. How do you get dark skies in a city or town? Well, that's always governed by a local ordinance. I know that you have worked on something or considering it. We have a collection of ordinances that are available if you'd like something to compare it to. But typically these ordinances have to be customized to fit what the community wants. It will define what they like to see as dark sky lighting, how it should be set up, where it should be used. It's usually set up in various zones depending on what the local government decides is appropriate. It almost always defines some kind of a phase-in period and grandfathering some existing lights and so on. It usually will include industry standard classifications for light fixtures. We can help with that if you need it. It will always reflect those 5 lighting principles, you know, put light where you need it, only as bright as you need it, warm color temperature rather than cool, etc. We can share with you what works, but it's really your show. And so, you know, there's always, you know, the sister who comes in from the coast, flies in from the coast, knows all the answers. I've got a sister like that who lives in San Francisco, and it can get old. And I'm not the guy calling from Salt Lake who has all the answers. What I hope to have is to furnish some help for you if you need it and if you want it. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. And that is, there's some common misconceptions. A lot of people think dark skies means blundering around in the dark. That's not it at all. We can go to the next slide. What dark skies really means is that you have lighting that's friendly to the sky, not no light. So the next slide. More light means always more safety. Well, we've talked about that. Next slide, that's not true either. Light in the wrong place doesn't help. What you want is light in the right place at the right time. And that's what you need. Not just light anywhere for no particular reason. The next one, it's too expensive. The next, well, you light only what's needed. There's no value to light where it's not needed, but there is value to be able to see better at night. Okay, next slide if we could. How can Virgin make it happen? Well, typically what happens is a town will start with an inventory. What kind of lights have you got now? How many of them are there? What improvements could be made? Spread the word, invite some help. Figure out not necessarily what the problems are, but how do you make things better? Set some goals, make them realistic, but stretch. I mean, this is nothing you haven't heard before. Educate people. How is this going to help Virgin? What will the benefits be for your citizens? Get a few, and this one I can't stress more, get a few sample outdoor light fixtures, put them up and see what people think of it. It's kind of hard for people to imagine what it's going to be, but if you can say, okay, go down to the corner of Mill Street and whatever, and look at the light there, that is a dark skylight. What do you think? And then, you know, build a community team and take advantage of others' experiences. The fact that there are a lot of certified dark sky places in Utah means that you have a lot of people in a lot of different towns who have gone through the process. Some of them are small towns like yours. Some of them are quite a bit bigger. But you have people who are out there who are happy to help. I'm sure some of you know some of those people. I can help, Dark Sky Utah can help by pointing you towards people who can be useful. Use us as a resource. Okay, next slide. Go out and enjoy the night sky yourself. Visit a dark sky place near you. There's a bunch of them. Springdale, for example, is a dark sky town. And they've done very well. It's made a real difference for that town. It also shows you how you can have a dark sky certified community and still have active and profitable businesses. So a lot of businesses are worried that, boy, if I don't have a bright light, how will I attract customers? Now, Springdale shows you how to do it, and that's handy. Go to a star party, learn something new. Astronomy is a big deal. A lot of astronomers are interested in dark skies, but surprisingly, the Utah Audubon Society strongly supports dark skies because good lighting is so useful for birds and bad lighting is so awful for birds. Finally, just think about it. If people sat outside, next slide, people sat outside and looked at the stars every night, I'll bet they'd live a lot differently. You've got a good life there in Virgin. It's driving around, it's easy to tell that's a great place to live. But go out and look at the sky. It changes your view of a whole lot of things. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. I tried to make this quick and efficient. So if you've got any questions, I would be happy to give a stab at answering them. Otherwise, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I'm sorry I'm not there in the flesh. We tried that and it didn't work for reasons out of your control and mine. But I really do appreciate the chance to share this with you.
Alan, can you hear me? This is Kent.
Yes, I can, Kent. How you doing?
We want to thank you for coming a couple of weeks ago and putting up with the outage that we had at the time and to be able to put this on today. We want to thank you and the staff for being able to do that. Does anybody have any questions for him? Okay.
I do.
You must have done a good job because there aren't a lot of questions.
Okay.
Well,
Kent,
you've
this
got
is-
my email, so you know how to get hold of me. So
Yeah, Alan, we do have a question from Commissioner Larry.
Thank you for the presentation. I know that we have, the opportunity to put in grandfathered lighting, I guess, in our ordinance. If that's not included, are there grants for homeowners and businesses to upgrade their lighting to dark sky compliant lighting or anything that can help offset the cost of retrofitting existing homes?
I wish there were, Larry. That I don't know of any. There have been a couple grants for different cities occasionally through the Utah Department of Tourism for people that wanted to become dark sky certified for the sake of astrotourism. And they have applied for and gotten grants from the State Tourism Department. I don't know of any others. Dark Sky Utah is definitely a volunteer organization and our budget is small. So we can't help. Dark Sky International is also small. So I wish I could tell you we could dump, a few $100,000 to help, but we can't.
Got it, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Alan, this is Darlene Pope and I'm virtual. I'm actually in Salt Lake with you.
Oh, okay.
My question is, do you have any data on the average cost of converting to dark sky lighting, either commercially or
what you have to begin with and how many light fixtures and what kind you're gonna put in.
Okay.
I can certainly get some figures on the cost of light fixtures and so on. But the average conversion cost has so many variables, I don't quite know how to answer that one.
And is dark sky lighting more economical? Like, would it make Rocky Mountain Power happy?
It used to be a lot more economical until LEDs came out. And LEDs are all about the same price. So the LEDs that are warmer are about the same price as the LEDs that are cool. If you have already converted to LEDs, then the cost is going to be about the same as the LEDs. If, on the other hand, the city is still using incandescent lights, you will see a pretty stout decrease in electricity costs as you go to dark sky compatible LED lights.
So that is street lighting. I'm just wondering if Rocky Mountain has any residential programs.
You know, I'm not absolutely sure. I can get you in touch with one of our volunteers who is also a lighting engineer.
I'd appreciate that, Alan.
Okay. Tell you what, could you put in I don't see the chat here. Tell you what, I will send something to Kent on that if I.
Okay.
Okay, and what do you want? Okay, cost of conversion. I'm just writing a message to myself here. Okay.
Could a dark sky community like Springdale or one of the other ones be able to give us a ballpark figure on what is the average cost for residents?
As a matter of fact, that would be a good idea. The person you want to talk to in Springdale, just a second here, is
Tom Dancy.
Yeah, Tom Dancy in Springdale would be the right person to answer how much it costs them to do that kind of conversion. And he will have fairly up-to-date numbers because theirs is fairly recent. In fact, I was thinking of calling him to get some of these numbers. So if I can send you, Kent, do you have Tom's contact information?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Maybe Darlene, if you could talk to Kent and get that contact information, that would probably be the most efficient way to handle it.
Okay, thank you for that, Alan.
Oh, thank you for asking. That's a very, very good and very pertinent question. I appreciate it.
It's a valid concern. Yeah.
We have one more question, Sherry McCray.
Yeah, I was curious about, in between Kent and Paul and our guest speaker, dark sky compliance, is that based on the actual light fixtures that have been converted? Or is it actually based off the light that you see on a home, in a residence, or when you're driving down the street?
Yeah.
So if the town is wanting to go towards a dark sky certification, that actually means the physical light fixtures have to be changed out in order to do that. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have a lot of lights, but they don't use them, only when it's necessary. So my concern was, could it cost $9,000-10,000 to actually change out light fixtures? But if you never use those lights except for when necessary, would that not count towards your dark sky certification?
Well, there are two things that go into dark sky certification. One is that you really have to do a lighting survey, and they like to see a plan for converting the majority of the lights in town to dark sky, dark sky qualified lights. But that doesn't have to happen immediately. If you have a plan to do it over time, that is sufficient. If your skies are dark enough. And so part of the dark sky certification is having people measure how dark your skies actually are. And the way that worked, that's how I got involved in dark skies to begin with, is somebody talked me, and my sister-in-law talked me and my wife into going out at night and measuring how dark the sky is. There are little instruments you do that with. And if the sky falls within a certain range, you could qualify fairly quickly for dark sky certification if you also have a survey and a plan for eventually converting to dark sky compatible lights.
I actually, I'm sorry, finish.
So it's a twofold thing. It's how dark are your skies and what are you doing to make sure that they stay that way?
I actually, if I drive through Virgin for the most part, and I drive through Springdale, which is already certified, I think we're well on our way.
I do too.
And and being so close to the Virgin River, where I've personally counted 100 species of birds fly through my backyard.
Wow.
We're on the migratory path, you know.
Mhm.
And so many of them are at risk, you know.
Yeah.
That's something to consider as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're here in Salt Lake. Dark Sky is cooperating with the local Audubon Society to do measurements of dark places in the along the Wasatch Front, and to try and help the bird population here. And there's still a lot of birds even in Salt Lake. I've identified about 60 species in my yard here in the middle of town. We don't get them coming to the bird feeder anymore because we've got a Cooper's hawk who sits in one of the trees close, so the little birds won't show themselves anymore. But
Thank you.
Any other comments?
well,
Alan, we sure appreciate this.
well, I
Yes.
appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you, even if it's only virtual.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I will sign out. Have another commitment a little later, so I'll get ready for that.
Okay.
Thank you much.
That brings us to item E on the agenda. We can get some more comments between us and possibly those who have also attended when we get down to items for public hearing. On item E, this is open forum. You have a limit of 2 minutes. Anybody that would like to talk about anything that is not on the agenda. So don't get hurt rushing up here. Okay, takes care of item E. And we go to F, commissioner comments. Where are we? Any commissioner comments about all the comments that were made by the public?
I have no comments.
Okay, all right. I will entertain a motion to close the public meeting and
Does
open
Darlene have a comment?
public hearing. What?
Does Darlene have a comment?
Darlene, did you have another comment?
I do not have a comment. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you, Val. Can I hear a motion to close the public meeting and open the public hearing?
I move we close the public meeting and open the public hearing.
Val has made that motion,
I second.
seconded by Larry. All those in favor say aye.
Yes.
Aye. All right, items for comment, number 1 is ordinance 2024, an ordinance, do we know what number that is?
No, we're gonna sign if it passes.
An ordinance of the town of Utah providing that Virgin Uniform Land Use Code be amended to revise section 2.12 definitions, repealing section 8.4 outdoor lighting, and adding a new chapter to the number chapter 50, outdoor lighting. So comments, commissioners,
No, this is just for the public vote.
public only? Oh, that's right, sorry. I thought we already gave the public an opportunity, but not particularly for that. Okay, anybody in the public that would like to talk about the outdoor lighting?
Kent,
George?
I just-
we have,
I am
yeah,
not,
go ahead.
I
Yes.
just want to know, am I missing any letters that were, or emails that were sent to the town on this issue?
There were none,
Thank you.
okay. George?
Thank you. George Rodriguez. First of all, I apologize for being late. We got a full house at the restaurant. And I remembered it last minute. I would like to make a comment regarding the lighting. Before I do, my understanding is that there'll be some changes. Was that the question we just put to you? As far as like, what will it entail? When do we know that?
Okay, good question. I guess that would entail when we pass an ordinance. So at this point, we're just discussing the ordinance.
Okay, very
And
good.
I think it might have been helpful a little bit. I think the presentation that we had before you came would have been a little bit helpful as far as timing and how that would affect a commercial operation that's in existence already. And will there be grandfathering for the lighting that you have, a period of time for you to become compliant, or for commercial or private entity, public house, home, or so forth to become compliant to that? And that will depend upon how the ordinance goes through our government and how that ordinance proposal gets changed or approved. And I think anybody else have a better answer than that?
Well, there is language today in the proposed ordinance that gives a certain amount of time, but I feel like it's very generous to come into compliance. Does that help?
It's very general or
It's very
generous?
generous.
Generous in what
The
respect?
time frame.
Oh, the timeframe is
Right,
generous.
it's
Okay.
not like, okay, boom, you
Very
have to
good.
do this. There's a time frame where you have to come into compliance and,
It'll develop, yeah.
correct. It's a generous amount of time.
All right.
A comment from Paul on that?
I think Val hit it. If you pass the ordinance in its current form, without changing some of the time periods, you would have a year to get inventory done that Alan spoke of. And then once that inventory is done, then there's a 6-year amortization period, if I'm not mistaken, on how it's currently drafted. That's assuming that the planning commission agrees with that and the town council agrees with that. They can shorten it or extend it as it goes through the legislative process.
Very good. Okay. Very quickly, both on residential and commercial, I can begin with the restaurant Balcony One. First of all, our hours of operation are such that we're closed at 9 o'clock. In the summer, obviously, 9 o'clock, it's still light out there. So it's really the winter hours. And in short, I feel that the type of lighting we use now, and it is those LEDs that are like 2 watts each, covering the perimeter of the acre, times, for argument's sake, let's say 100 lights, you're looking at 200 watts spread over a large area. We don't have any big lights. And at my restaurant, you will never see a big 4x8 LED flashing sign, which I think is a little over the top for our area. We try to keep it rural as we can, for lack of a better word, okay? So hopefully we are in compliance. Whatever new rules come in, we'll take a look at them, and I hope there's a study that will give us some parameters as to the lighting all the way down to the wattage and where it's pointing and et cetera, et cetera. Because if you add all of those things up, you can light a building. You might have even seen this copper wire with what amounts to the size of rice, these little lights. I don't even know what they put out, but you can certainly see them at night, and in my opinion, not affect the night sky. Safety is also an important point, because you walk out of the restaurant, you have a dark parking lot. I think safety and security become an issue on that. Okay, we're certainly not gonna make it look like a Walmart parking lot with those enormous lights. But somewhere between one extreme and the other, security and safety have to be taken into account, in my opinion. On a residential side of it all, I'm still adamant about where I live and the fact that we had lights there. And I'll repeat myself, there's something quote unquote romantic about streetlights. They give some flavor, some style. You know, go to any other country and you see that. To have zero lights, I think is wrong, again, on the same 2 points, and that is safety and security all over again. If my wife, for example, takes our little dog out for a walk, especially in the wintertime, like 6 o'clock, it's dark. Now, let me kind of take that back. In the wintertime, you don't have snake problems necessarily. But throughout the year, it would be nice to be able to walk out of your house, walk along the road there, and at least be able to see what is going on instead of being surprised by it. In this case, you know, a rattlesnake or something. So there is safety involved. And I also feel that a neighborhood like Desert Garden Estates feels more like a neighborhood. It feels a little more secure if there is some kind of lighting. If there's no lighting, anybody in dark clothes can be trespassing through and not even noticed. Those are my 2 cents, what I have to bring to this meeting, and I hope that we can find common ground. Thank you.
Any other comment? Paul Louis?
Paul Louis. I do have one correction, I gotta mention to George, but before that, greetings from I just came from a very dark area of southern Utah. I was out in Hanksville. Now, Hanksville is not as dark because it's not dark sky certified, but Torrey next door, Capitol Reef is dark sky, and Goblin Valley Park is supposedly one of the darkest places on earth. And in Hanksville, just not last night, but 2 nights ago, I just drove a couple miles down the road and did some night astrophotography and captured a Milky Way and some great shots that I had. And I was just learning how from one of my mentors that travels to southern Utah just to do that and to go hiking around there. So there's an economic value to dark skies. I think I mentioned it once at the town council meeting that when I was in Flagstaff on one of my trips, I stopped at a motel and they just promoted dark sky in on the TV. When you walk in, it had a looping video about dark sky and Flagstaff's dark sky community. So there's a large city there that is dark sky certified, and they're able to survive. And and they have a lot of businesses. And there's restaurants that are named after the dark sky. So they've learned to capitalize on the dark sky itself. So by attracting photographers and keeping the dark sky and tourists, they've been able to utilize that to their economic advantage. Normally I would not come up and speak, but since I'm the one that drafted this ordinance, I want to give you a little bit of background. First of all, Kent asked me to assist him in drafting it. And he suggested that I follow Springdale. I looked at Helper, I looked at Tories, and I looked at Flagstaff's ordinances and Springdale's. This is primarily patterned after Springdale with some changes in it. The one correction, George, that I have to make, I said 6 years. It's actually 7 years amortization period that's listed in the ordinance. And that, of course, could be changed by the town council when it gets up to them, depending on public comment and the planning and zoning commission's recommendation. Some items in here for your consideration is the dates stem from 1 October 2025 and the passage of 1 October 2024. That was in anticipation of this being completed and up to the town council and approved by them. Obviously, those dates may want to change. You may want to recommend a different date as November, December, or push it back a year to January. Surely make that recommendation if you feel it's necessary. I would suggest at least adjusting it a month or so backwards, because we haven't got as far as we should have by 1 October. And won't be approved at the earliest until October. So at the minimum, we need to change some of the dates to 1 November 2024 and 1 November 2025 with anticipation that it could be passed in October or maybe in December to give town council an extra month. Since this was drafted in July, most of it, unless I review it again, I'm just off the top of my head as to what I remember. One of the items was there was some difficulty in locating when I looked at the standard for flagpoles and the lighting on flagpoles. The recommendation of the dark skies, I also looked at the dark sky certification ordinances that they give as an example. There's in other communities, the luminance for flagpoles were difficult to find online. It was, when I went online, they were $2,000 or $3,000. So I increased that level of luminance in our ordinance. So it matched the lowest one I could find on Amazon. Now, maybe you want to get in touch with Alan, and I didn't want to extend his time because he's been gracious enough with the number of times he's checked in with us and been here, that I didn't want to extend that any further. Maybe Kent can get an email to him to ask about where some lighting is for flagpoles and what the cost is, so you can have a better idea as to what that should be. So I threw that in there just so they could see what the minimum I found on Amazon. That wasn't outrageously priced for the community or for the individual. You might be able to locate something different. Other than that, that kind of gives you an idea of some of the items and how this was drafted and prepared. I'd say 95% of it's pattern after spring breaks.
Yeah. Any questions to Paul? This is a discussion, I think you can ask the person to talk, give
This
comments.
is actually a public
This is a
hearing.
public hearing.
This is only a public hearing. Where
So-
the public gets to comment and comment only.
Okay,
So I'm a member of the public, but I also drafted it. I thought it was appropriate, this would be the time to speak. And then I'll stay around for your questions after the public's finished giving their testimony.
Chairman McCray? So I was trying to read through it a little bit and with Larry. And I was trying to determine how many outdoor lights that you could have on your property. And I think based on lumens or wattage, that it was gonna be somewhere around, was it 8?
So, yeah, based on a 60 watt light bulb, which
Yes.
has 2,000 lumens, is that what it was? Yeah, 2,000 lumens, anyway,
But my concern was that I went around our house today to count how many outdoor lights that we have. And our house was built in 2008, and we added an RV garage to the house. But, we have, 5 garage doors and 8 man doors. So you can imagine that around all these garage doors, there's lighting on each side of the door, and at every man door, there's a light. And then, so in the front yard, we had 10 lights. In our backyard, we have 21 lights. We have an outdoor kitchen, we have these things, but these lights are never on unless we are receiving guests or guests are leaving. But I'm thinking, if we're only allowed 8 lights and there's an audit and somebody comes and, we have to report how many lights we have and somebody's verifying the lights. Just calculating in my head anywhere from $200 to $500 to replace lights or not have lights where we have rock columns or adobe or stucco. I mean, I think we're looking at $10,000 to change, an existing house. And I think that when there was conversation about this before, I had kind of thought that there was gonna be a grandfathering on existing dwellings. But I don't think that's the case, or the way that it's written now, it's not, but you have a period of time. But it could be a financial hardship for some people to think about the house that they purchased and it already has a large amount of lights, but like I said, I'm all for the dark sky. And we hardly ever have our lights on at all, except for when we have company. So that's why I was kind of asking, well, is the dark sky certification based off of the amount of light that is seen currently? Maybe an auditor, drives by and can see that, maybe a particular house or neighborhood has lights that are on all the time. Is there a time restriction where maybe dark sky starts at 9:30 or 10 PM, and maybe there's different hours for the winter? So these were just kind of concerns that I had looking through what was written and knowing that we could, make public comment on it. I thought I better say something, that those were my concerns.
Thank you.
Well, just a follow-up on a couple things. I visited with the mayor after last meeting of the town council. And one of the questions was code enforcement. When are we gonna get a code enforcement officer? And it came down to the fact that that he needed more money. And we talked about the possibility of hiring him and having him do other items, because it was only part-time. And maybe if we pay him for a full-time job and have him do some public works. But one of the things I suggested to the mayor is he could probably do some of the audit work on this, on the lighting. So I don't know where the mayor is with that, but that's a possibility that you got a code enforcement officer, which is the perfect person to do the auditing. I don't know the answers to some of your questions, but I do know that there's a difference. To come into compliance doesn't mean you have to replace everything. And that's where you have to have somebody work with dark sky certification to figure out what needs to be done. But sometimes you can just shield the lighting at a very low cost expense instead of replacing it. Those are questions that we'll probably need to get answered, and maybe we can talk with Springdale and find out what they went through, what they discovered when they did their audit.
George?
Yes, thank you. I would like to add something in light of the conversation that happened. To be more clear about residential, our house is always dark outside, with the exception of when we have some guests and they're pulling in and all of that. So I'm really not worried about compliance there. I think we have like 4 or 6 lights outside anyway. Okay, that said, the street lights are a different category. And the one question that I have here and now, and I want it on record, is that the streetlights at Desert Gardens were turned off maybe 2 years ago already, I don't even know. And it was supposed to be temporary. And now it seems to be the default. Nobody seems to have come to any conclusions. If they have, I apologize, I missed it, all right? But I still insist that it should be taken into consideration, the security and the safety, once again, of the residents and the public that may be walking around outside of their homes on the streets. That we don't have a sidewalk and walk on the street. Okay, and on I don't even know how to phrase it really, but let's not have an incident and then decide to act upon it. Whether someone gets hurt or anything on the negative side, let me just leave it at that. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Because under those conditions, I'm sure there'll be lawsuits over it. So I'd like to know when the lights are going to be back on at Desert Gardens. And I hope I'm very clear on that. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Number 82.
Okay, number 2, ordinance, 2024 XX, amending chapter 42. Closing resort zone to further expansion. My understanding on this is that the resort zone is kind of a redundant ordinance that has been taken over by highway resort zone ordinance. Anybody have any comment from the public on this? Okay. Item 3, ordinance amending and restating in its entirety, chapter 18, version uniform land use to establish subdivision regulations that meet the requirements established by the Utah State Code. And I would like to have a comment from Riker if you have one on this.
Yeah, so this ordinance, we did a brief presentation of this ordinance to the city council last month. And then talked about it in the work meeting with the planning commission last week. What this ordinance does is it restates, amends and restates the subdivision code for the town of Virgin so that it can comply with the new requirements of Utah State Code. In the past 2 legislative sessions, the state has changed how this process is to work and have put into place some mandates that the town has to come into compliance with by December 31st of this year.
Okay, any comments from the public? Okay. Item number 4, conditional use permit application by Virgin Town requesting a change in use of the property located at 91 South Mill Street from a church to a public building. Any public comment? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, no public comment? Then we move to the public meeting, and I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing and open the public meeting.
Larry, why don't you do the honors?
I move to close the public hearing and open the public meeting.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Yes,
Aye.
I think Darlene is gone.
Darlene, you there?
Oh.
Hi, I'm not gone.
Okay, this is a public meeting, and we're going to, hear motions and vote for items 2 through 4,
Mhm.
is that correct?
Yes, so we're gonna have an update by Riker.
What was that?
We're gonna have an update from Riker first.
Yeah, number 1 is an update from Riker on upcoming ordinances.
The only thing that I have at this time is in the work meeting last week, we discussed the neighborhood commercial zone. If you haven't already, if you can get your comments to, Crystal so that she can forward those to me, so I can incorporate that into the draft.
Okay.
Get something going.
Great, I'll get your email when I send out. Yesterday.
Regarding,
Did you get that email too?
I did, yeah.
You want to explain that?
Yeah.
All of right.
So there was an email sent out yesterday regarding the process for, or the procedure for requesting new ordinances from
Yes.
Sunrise Engineering. You should have all received that,
Yeah.
and that just kind of outlines what we talked about in the work meeting as well. The reasoning for that is just to make sure that any direction given by the town to Sunrise is on the same page. That way, when we're drafting this ordinance, we're not going in one direction and the town is intending us to go a different direction. The other reason for this procedure is to ensure that Sunrise is able to build the town, adequately for the things that they're requesting, and that we're not using our time on things that the town doesn't want us to pursue.
Okay, so, I have a question. Let's take, me wanting to do the lighting ordinance, update, and so I asked somebody like Paul if he would help me write that, which was several months ago. So let's take that as an example as to how we could do that, how we might do that differently than we did. I don't go to Paul to ask for somebody to help to write that. I just give it to you and say we need a lighting ordinance.
So if that's something that the town wants,
I give it to the clerk.
it would be sent to Crystal, to the clerk. And then they would, if approval was needed from the town council or the mayor to send that on to Sunrise, then she would obtain that, and then it would be sent to Sunrise at that point.
So that's. Once again, I feel like we're dodging this question. Are we no longer as a, planning and zoning commission to draft or have someone draft or propose a ordinance to the planning and zoning unless it's been given to the clerk first, who is gonna go to you?
So whether or not the ordinance goes to Sunrise Engineering is up to the determination of the town. The way that this administrative order is written is it's for those ordinances that the town desires, that Sunrise Engineering writes. Whether or not that's going to be all of your land use ordinances or whatever that may be, that needs to be determined by the town. That's not something that Sunrise would determine.
I appreciate that. Paul?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, that administrative order doesn't preclude you from drafting your own ordinance or somebody else, like a town council member. It's just got to be sent to Crystal. It can't be sent to Riker directly.
Okay,
So you still have the powers of planning and zoning commission to say, I want this drafted. It just has to go to Crystal to.
Okay.
Correct?
so,
with the mayor's approval, correct? or town council approval?
Well, so yeah, the only reason for that is for budgetary purposes.
Okay, okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, I'm a verbal communicator. I could call Riker directly and get a question answered
No.
in 3 minutes. I know, it's not
Oh, okay.
allowed.
Right.
But it would take me 2 hours to type that same email because I type like this. And it wouldn't have the same tone or, I mean, I could say, hey, Riker, is this what you mean by this? And he can answer it in 10 minutes and we're done, or 3 minutes and we're done. Instead, I've got to spend the time to type an email that I hope is saying what I think it says, send it to Crystal, and the mayor has to come look at it and say, yes, that's a good enough question to send to Riker, and then Riker has to spend the same amount of time on it, whether it went through there or not.
That's my
It just seems very inefficient, and for a guy like me, unfortunately, I'm not gonna use his services much, nothing against Riker, I'd love to call you and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking.
Actually, this is how most towns and cities run, even when they have their own letter, it's not in the contract.
So,
And Larry, you might be surprised. The times that your question might be answered by Crystal.
so I've sent an email, he's looked at it, we've made some changes over the last work meeting, but I don't know the status of it, so now I have to type another email to go through Crystal and say, hey, you're still working on this because it didn't come up into my meeting, so.
Say this to you budget wise, right? You call him, you all call him, it takes 10 minutes. He's not gonna bill us for 10 minutes. He's gonna bill us for more. So what Crystal does is she takes things, she waits maybe a couple of days, she doesn't shoot things over quickly. She compiles questions, so then she can send them off. So that he can communicate correctly and timely back to Crystal as best as possible. So financially, we're not rewarding him and spending more money. We're answering your questions, but she's able to just bring everything together in a quick thing so she can bring it back to you in a timely manner. Financially, it's just way better.
And then this administrative order also allows for the planning commission to ask these questions or request these ordinances in a meeting that I'm in attendance in. And so, I mean, if you have questions during this update on upcoming ordinances, that's when that can be asked, if you'd like to ask them in person.
Yes.
I try to be as timely as I can when emails are sent to me and try to answer those questions as quickly as possible. Along with budgetary issues, the other concern would be if we have an ordinance that we expect to, or that the town wants drafted. And let's say I get a call from you and you say, well, I want these things in it. Then I get a call from Ken and he says, well, I don't want those things in it. Who am I supposed to go with? And so we're trying to eliminate using up time on that.
Right, I'm not trying to make you change your ordinance, I just might have a question on it that you could answer pretty quickly. But if I'm allowed to ask questions, and I didn't know that I could, but if I'm allowed to ask you questions. So that live work ordinance that we submitted, we made some changes on last week, when can we vote on that, or when can we have a public hearing on that?
So I can, so in the work meeting, I thought I heard that you were gonna make those changes to the ordinance. If that's something that I need to do, I can make the changes and send over a draft. I can probably have that to you next week.
I can make them, and then we can,
Larry, this is Darlene.
yes,
Can you hear me?
yes,
So you sent that ordinance to me and you indicated you had made that change? Is that
No.
not true?
no, I didn't make the change, and I don't remember sending it.
Yes, you did. Because it's scheduled as of now, correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, but for public hearing in October.
That's what I thought we were discussed in the work meeting.
And again, I heard like every third word you said, and every.
So maybe there was just a miscommunication in the work meeting. But am I not correct? We were all talking about doing?
Yeah, I thought that Larry's gonna make the changes to the ordinance and then get it over to.
Yeah, so I didn't understand that part, but I will, and I'll submit them to Crystal for on your agenda.
So, as I know our work meeting was a little off with everybody, so do you guys want to discuss that real quick and go over that while we have Riker here?
Sure, so the changes that Riker suggested was that, so in parking for the live work units, I had just assumed that there would be one commercial unit and one apartment, or one habitable portion. And that those people that work there will have the same cars and the same parking lot as the people that live there, so there's no need for an extra parking spot, but Riker brought up the fact that it could be local, and I hadn't even considered that, which is why we have Riker. And I agreed that everything after the first habitable unit, there would be, the square footage for that unit would be included in the parking requirements. So if that's the acceptable, then I'll make those changes and submit it to.
In the morning, it's going for public hearing, and the signs are up tomorrow.
Okay.
Morning.
Any other comments?
I have a comment. This is Heath Snow. Riker, I would suggest that we have somewhere probably within your number 4 or 5, someplace where you have the town attorney review the draft and provide comment as well, just because, I mean, Riker's fantastic in my experience in drafting ordinances, but he's not an attorney, and I don't know that he would be as familiar with certain things that might, we just don't want to adopt something that, you know, violates Utah state law or federal law. So, yeah, like I said, I would like to be able to give some comment.
I think that would be wise.
And Steve?
So kind of help, the way I understood it with your answer to hold on to the question of confining and zoning still right ordinances. Yes, the way I understand it is that Riker's either for ones that are very complicated or ones that require the state's requiring like the subdivision ordinance where they basically said we wrote it. There's so many changes you're allowed and so many you're not allowed to make. So those are certain, I think those are the type of things that Riker can do. You can always write the ordinance, like your writing ordinance, and present it to Riker with the mayor's approval for clarification, for correctness, for legalities, and then also to keep. So you guys can still write them, like, if you don't have, he doesn't have to write an ordinance if you're just changing a definition. Or if you're just changing a part in a chapter. That's not the ordinance. He's more of starting from scratch on something, or we're required to do something a little complicated. That help?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Misty, and thanks, Keith, for your comments and.
Yeah.
Okay. No further then, we're gonna move on. What number are we on? Yeah, we are on number 2. Discussion and possible vote on the new planning and zoning chairperson. Okay, discussion. My opinion. I'd like to see. Frankly, I'd feel more comfortable if we were all here and had a chance to talk about it. I kind of feel like we're a little bit ahead of the game. Not that I want to be in this chair, but I would rather have a full commission, which means we need to have another commissioner appointed by the mayor. That's kind of my feeling at this point is let's get a full quorum and have a good discussion about where we want to go and get Val back to where she's comfortable being here. We're totally comfortable, Val, you being where you are right now. Darlene. Sorry, Darlene, I'm sorry about that.
Oh.
You're
I'm good.
So, that's my comment. That's my feeling at the moment is, But I really appreciate the others' feelings about that as well. If you have a different feeling, please speak up.
I only assume this is on the agenda because you didn't want the position, but if you're happy in the position, then we don't need to vote on another chair. You are the pro tem that steps up and you are now the chairman, right? We just need to appoint it.
He did mention he doesn't like sitting in that chair.
Oh, my God, but he likes it. I'd rather sit over there too.
Yeah, I sit here and compare myself to Cameron, and I am, a basket case. And, I don't feel comfortable, being here. I felt comfortable and supported by everybody, to be here and to take care of this for the time being. But, we need another commissioner, and I would not be willing, I would decline if I was nominated.
I feel like for the time being, it's working. As long as Darlene is, willing to continue the great job she's doing, getting our agendas together and getting them to Crystal on time. So for the time being, maybe we just sit tight until we get a new, commissioner and Darlene is back. And then we can revisit this discussion.
I should be back, next month.
Nice.
So should we elect another pro tem? Just in case Kent can't make it?
Darlene, are you okay with your role now for the time being?
You know what? I'm here to do whatever is the best for the commission and for the town.
Great.
Larry makes a point, about, okay, what if something happens that, Ken can't be here to be, in charge, to take over. So, that's an issue as well, but I agree with Val. Seems to be working this way for me right now. I'm okay with it. And Val?
No, this is Darlene. I would suggest, I agree with Larry, just because what if, Kent, you were ill? Then we need a pro tem. Even though those may change in a month or two.
Well, then I would not be opposed to, a nomination if it wanted to be made to choose a new pro temp.
You interested though?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
You're the only one that's had any seat
I
time
would entertain that motion, or my,
here. I move that Valerie becomes our pro tem chair.
okay, we have a motion that Valerie become our new pro temp.
I would second that.
And sounds like you might have some hesitation. Are you interested?
Oh. No, I just said I would second that.
Right, but it was slow. I thought maybe that because you're interested.
It's
It's a connection. Okay, all right.
We have a motion and a second nominating Valerie to
Can
be,
you roll call vote that?
to be the new pro temp. Any comments?
Crystal has just asked for a roll call.
Record vote? Sorry.
Crystal has asked for a roll call.
Yeah. So we'll vote. Larry, Val,
Sure.
Val, Darlene, gotta change your name. Don't type that.
Aye. Kent?
Aye. We are so formal here. We need to change, put on cloaks and robes.
Wigs. Okay,
We have a new pro temp, starting next week,
Congratulations.
you
Next
better
month.
show up, Ken.
starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow.
You need to show up. Item 3,
See, she's taking charge. See?
Take notes.
That's funny. Item 3, discussion and possible vote to recommend approval or denial. I kept thinking that you'd stick your head in the door again, Heath, and say that there was something wrong with that, so I appreciate you being quiet. Might not be there.
I'm here.
Discussion and possible vote to recommend approval or denial of the conditional use permit application by Virgin Town requesting a change in the use of the property located at 91 South Mill Street from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to public building. Discussion?
I,
I move we
mhm.
vote to approve the CUP application by Virgin Town requesting a change in use of the property located at 91 South Mill Street from a church to a public building.
I
No,
second that.
I have a comment.
Okay,
I think that, that there has been, on one hand, a lot of jubilation for this opportunity. And, that the town can, purchase and occupy this property and add to the town's property assets. And I think I probably am in general very favor of that excitement and opportunity as well. But I think there are some people who have voiced to me some concerns about how can we afford this and what does this do to our budget and lots of things that probably have already been discussed in closed and open circles. But I did make a phone call to some people to clarify my mind as to the financial obligation and how that would affect our town. And it was strongly and convincingly given to me that the town is very capable of handling this obligation in the future. And people who might be concerned about, well, what if times change? What if there's a Great Depression? What happens if we can't make those payments? And I think those are really good questions, but the people that I talked with who have not freedom to say, said that the likelihood of that would be questionable, but possible, and that the town and the setup of that financing would be able to be handled in the most extreme of circumstances. I wanted to make that comment.
So we have a motion and a second.
Motion is been made. And I don't think I need to repeat it, do I? No. Okay,
Setting the rules.
so we'll do a count vote. Valerie,
Yes.
Kent, yes,
Yes.
Larry. Darlene,
yes,
it passes. Item number 4. A possible vote to recommend approval or denial of ordinance 2024 discussion and possible vote amending chapter 42, closing the resort zone to further expansion. Any experts on this in the room?
I brought this ordinance forward.
great.
I have heard years ago that this had already been passed, the resort zone was closed. When I did some digging, I found the numbers of the ordinance closing the zone, but when I went to town hall to look into the archives, those ordinances were not there. So that's why I brought this forward, for once and for all, to close that zone officially.
Okay, and for 80-year-old minds, I was wondering today about how this relates to highway resort.
Molly,
and resort, and
leave it.
Resort ordinance. What?
She's yelling at the dog. So the only property in town that was in the resort zone was Zion River Resort. That's the only property. So when we came up with the highway resort zone, it kind of wrapped into it, but somewhere along the line, closing of the resort zone didn't happen. Well, I think it did happen, but I can't find the proof that it happened, so that's why I brought this up.
Okay, any other comments on this?
Yes, would this mean that the existing resort zone would be rezoned to highway resort zone, or just there's no new
There's
resort
no,
zone?
yeah, it just closes the zone for future development.
Right. Motion. I'm willing to hear a motion on subject 4.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2024 ... amending the chapter 42, closing the resort zone to further expansion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second from Larry. Vote count. Larry, Darlene,
I,
Kent, I, Val,
Yes.
passes unanimously. Is there any other business coming forth?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
wait. I
Val,
just want,
Darlene,
I just want us to be aware that our comments to Kevin about his proposed general plan survey, as well as to Riker on the cottage or the small commercial, neighborhood commercial, we need to try to get those to them by October 4th.
Right.
Okay, that's my only comment.
Next week,
October 4th.
the end
And,
of next week.
and are you working on that?
Well, we all need to be working on it.
Okay.
So it's just reading the ordinance and making our comments, submitting our comments to write.
To Crystal. You submit them to Crystal.
It's catchy.
I meant Crystal.
It's contagious. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Yes, indeed.
Hi,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
thank
It
you.
is freezing in this building.
I know, I'm cold
It
too.
is freezing.
Over there, we're all control and how.
I thought we were.
You're comfortable.